Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's wonderful to have your company today on the 6th day of April 2022. Our apologies for starting a little bit late. YouTube did not want to play along with us, but anyway, we go back online on both Facebook Live and YouTube both. So, well, it's as I mentioned before, it is wonderful to have your company on this day, and there is so much that we need to get through today. And it is what it is when they call about the election. So there's so much that's been talked about, and of course we knew that the election is going to be either the two dates that have been floated is either the 14th of May or the 21st. So we will yet to see. Let's see if the date gets revealed. And of course, right now there's so much that is happening with the campaigning already started. People are on that campaign trail, and of course, at this point in time, the auspicious Ram Navami is happening for the 9 days at most of the Indian temples, and all our Muslim brothers and sisters are observing the Ramadan. Many of the iftar dinners and other things taking place as well. And of course, it is wonderful to see that there is so much support that's happening out there for the flood victims. But what is sort of disheartening to see at this point in time, something to be alarmed, is the rise of COVID cases. So, within the community, we've been getting notices and we've been notified of so many people who have, contracted COVID just lately. It is becoming rampant. Well, here's the first report that everything is as the survivor recalls it.
We're in the town of Bucha, just outside the capital, Kiev, and this is where the bodies of civilians were found in recent days. They'd been shot dead by the Russians. Some of them had their hands and feet tied. The bodies have been cleared, but what remains here is the wreckage of a fierce battle. You can see destroyed tanks, ruined houses and bullet casings on the ground. We've watched the military bomb disposal unit clear mortars and unexploded ammunition, and we've spoken with residents who spent weeks holed up in their houses here while the battles raged and some of their neighbours were killed.
I haven't left my home since then until yesterday. Only yesterday I saw everything. My friend's house was burnt down. Everything is ruined.
This is the devastation left by the Russians as they retreated last week to regroup and focus their efforts on a new offensive in Ukraine's east. The atrocities here have attracted global attention, shock and condemnation, and calls for Russia's President Vladimir Putin to face a war crimes trial. This is the side of the war that Ukraine wants the world to see.
Well, it is quite a brave thing reporting from where he is, and I've been following him, the Dunlop guy, and now he's very, very courageous, being out there on the forefront and always reporting and sending us all those reports. Well, right, and of course we know that with the election that we were talking about, and of course the pre-selection that we were talking about, there were legal things, and there was an appeal that had been put in against the Prime Minister, but of course we all know that he's won that, and now that clears the path for the election to be called.
Everyone get in. You got you all in there?
Selfies at the servo to celebrate lower prices at the pump.
We've seen 20 to 30 cent falls already all around the country.
Scott Morrison punting that cheaper fuel will supercharge the coalition's election chances.
This didn't happen by accident.
The Prime Minister asserting the halving of federal fuel tax is a side benefit of an improving bottom line.
Cost of living relief that's been provided by good economic management.
This reckless rorting and wasteful spending must stop.
Labor supported the temporary cut to fuel excise and one-off cost of living payments, but offered this dose of reality.
Petrol prices and interest rates will be about to rise again no matter who wins.
The Shadow Treasurer says the national priority must be rebuilding communities devastated by recent floods. A state Liberal MP again attacking the federal response, which she claims was lacking.
The community attitude towards the federal government is very hostile at the moment. I would say it's on fire, actually.
I'll do one lap.
Catherine Cusack, the latest Liberal to publicly savage the PM.
I can't bring myself to vote for this government after what occurred here.
Our commitment into New South Wales for the flood response is $2.1 billion, and $1 billion of that is already in the pockets of those who've needed it most.
Despite the vicious acrimony inside the New South Wales branch of the Liberal Party, there was actually some good news for the Prime Minister today in his home state. The New South Wales Court of Appeal dismissing a legal challenge that threatened the validity of up to a dozen Liberal candidates. This clears the way for Scott Morrison to visit the Governor-General by week's end.
It's an excellent outcome, and we now get our candidates on the ground and get underway.
He should call the election, let Australians know when the date is.
Good luck in the election.
Thank you very, very much.
Got to win.
We're working hard at it.
Within 6 weeks or so, we'll all know. Andrew Probyn, ABC News.
Of course, within 6 weeks, we will all know. Let's see, how it all turns out, and we will, of course, be providing that coverage. Now, these days, there are cameras everywhere, meaning there are security cameras, then everyone's got their smartphones out and about with them. So, if you're thinking of bad behavior, watch out, you will be caught.
Oh, he's hit my car and I got it on film. I was filming. Whoa!
Can you call the police, please? It's a kitchen knife. He's got a big knife in his hand. Call the police right now. Triple zero right now.
So as I mentioned that these days you cannot get away from things, so it is really devastating many times to see the kind of acts, but with the smartphones and everything out and about, we are seeing a lot more getting cut up or caught up on camera and brought out into the open.
Having sufficient cash flow to pay taxes is one of the hardest parts of running a hairdressing salon. Owner Joey Scandizo says it's unfair small businesses have to fork out their fair share, while multinationals can exploit loopholes in the law.
It is difficult to hear that they are getting away with it. We work so hard to keep our business afloat.
In this year's budget, the government promised the Australian Taxation Office an extra $653 million for it to clamp down on multinationals. Since being set up in 2016, the ATO's Tax Avoidance Task Force has issued $26 billion in tax bills and collected $15 billion in cash. Both major parties have also committed to the OECD G20 Global Tax Plan that would force companies to pay a minimum rate of 15% instead of little or no tax at all now.
We've actually been front and centre to these efforts.
But it's unclear how soon the plan can be introduced and how much money the government will bank.
Some of the details are still being worked out, so it's not clear what actually would be the revenue implications for Australia.
Labor says it will speed up implementation of the OECD plan.
Right now, 2/5 of multinational profits are channelled through tax havens. The world is moving on this, but Australia is being left behind.
The OECD G20 tax plan has been years in the making. Governments around the world are struggling to pay for public services and want a bigger share of the revenue pie. But tax experts say Australia may only be a small winner.
The idea is to say some of this extra profit that you're making really should go to the place where the consumers are.
Former ATO Second Commissioner Andrew Mills says Australia's done well to tax multinationals, but because we have a relatively small population, it's estimated the global plan will bring in about $1 billion.
We're 25 million people out of 7 billion, so we're not a big market in the scheme of things, so it's not surprising that we're not expecting billions and billions of dollars.
Tax analysts say that's why the global minimum tax rate should be more than 15% and legal loopholes must be closed.
Right now, it's incredibly easy for companies to shift the revenue to places where it's taxed the least or, in many cases, not taxed at all.
Joey says policies to fight tax avoidance will play a part in helping him decide who he votes for at the upcoming election.
It will come into account once I'm making my judgment, but it would be one part that I'd love to see fixed and adjusted.
The issue could help sway the votes of many other Australians.
And I can feel the pain of that hairdresser owner. The pain of running small businesses, yes, as he mentioned, that, having enough cash flow to pay for the taxes, for the GST, for the PAYG and everything, it's very challenging. It is very challenging for small businesses. Many small businesses all have tax debts and, tax and the super and the like. So it is very, very hard to keep afloat. And if it wasn't for the owner-operators putting in long hours, many businesses would not operate. They would just cease to be. Because, as he mentioned, that multinationals and bigger companies, the smaller, medium businesses have to fork up the same amount, meaning percentage-wise. Of course, it is all on the amount of revenue and the profit that you make. But the small to medium businesses operate in a complete different environment to multinationals and, of course, large corporate companies. It is a different outfit there, and I think the call has been made many a times that this needs to be realized. So the working conditions and of course all that need to be upheld. This is what Australia is, and this is what Australia is proud about. But there has to be some provisions and some exemptions made for small businesses, small to medium-sized businesses, so that they can operate and they can employ more people. They can provide employment, provided there is some kind of incentive or some support from the government to keep these employees, because the last thing that anyone wants to see is anyone's rights or conditions being lowered. But if it is to be maintained, at what cost can it be maintained? Of course, small to medium-sized businesses are providing essential services too. They are providing much needed area. Everyone needs a haircut. You need many things in life, which are the regime of small to medium businesses. They are not large corporates. Large corporates are big, huge companies, big shopping malls, likes of Bunnings and big companies, right? So they are quite different to a small corner store or something like that, or mum and dad based business where they put in a lot of effort themselves. Little fruit shops many times, the way they're operating it's a family business. And one or two people just slug behind the scenes day in, day out to keep those things afloat. So I think that is a fair call. We all know that cost of living is going up.
Let's talk about inflation. Now, this loaf costs $3.40 at the local supermarket. In the 1980s, when Kylie was topping the charts, this guy was PM, and the world got its first Apple Macintosh. A loaf was counted as 4 pounds of bread, or about 2 kilos, and it would have set you back just 54 cents. So plugging all this into the calculator, the per gram price of bread is now 526% higher than it was back in the 80s. That's way more than it should be. That loaf should be costing us $2.45, according to the average inflation rate over the past 40 years. So that means the humble loaf of bread is actually a symptom of a much bigger problem. These days, there are three words on everyone's mind: cost of living. You've probably noticed a big part of your household budget has gone through the roof. It's for fuel. Using the average price of E10, you'd be paying $114 to fill up a 55-litre tank. A year ago, you would have paid about $75. That's a $39 difference, or a huge 52% in just 1 year. How much we pay at the pump comes down to the price of crude oil. When the cost of oil goes up, so does the price of fuel. And we can see pretty big spikes on this graph. And this right here is when Russia invaded Ukraine. Now, Russia is the world's third top supplier of crude oil after the UAE and Saudi Arabia, and supplies about 1/3 of Europe's needs.
As some of the lockdowns started to unwind, there's been an increasing demand for international travel again and transport. Right at that.
International travel is about to begin, and it has begun in many areas, and of course slowly more and more areas are being opened up, and of course we know that international students will start coming back. The free trade agreement that's been signed between Australia and India will see a lot more students and other people come into Australia on working visas. So that is another area that is going to be happening, and Prime Minister has now been cleared of that allegations that were made against the pre-selection, so the road is clear for him to call an election. He might even be making the trip to the governor this weekend. Who knows? He knows only. And the fuel prices have come down a lot. So yesterday we filled up at around $1.65, which is much more affordable than the $2 plus, which was a few weeks ago. So these are the top news for now. And of course, both parties are already in election mode. Right now, it's time to go to our daily India report. Don't forget, at 10 a.m. we'll have Usha Chandra here with the weekly real estate update. See you back with 10 on that. But right now, it's time to go to our daily India report.
Welcome to the Daily India Report that brings you glimpses of the changing India. In our first story, Indian Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar will travel to Tokyo later in April for the Indo-Japan 2+2 ministerial level talks. The meeting comes at a time when world leaders are urging India to step in and convince Russia to stop its invasion of Ukraine. Indian ministers will meet and hold talks with their Japanese counterparts Yoshimasa Hayashi and Nobu Kishi, respectively. The talks are significant amidst the Russia-Ukraine crisis, and the Quad members, Japan and Australia, have held bilateral meetings with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and several top-level visits from the US in recent weeks. These meetings have urged India to condemn Russia's actions. The 2+2 meeting of foreign and defense ministers later this month is also expected to take forward agreements on the strategic partnership. The meeting comes ahead of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Japan either in May or June for the Quad summit, and there is a bilateral component too. This will be an in-person Quad meeting where the President of the US, Joe Biden, and Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison are expected to be present too. The Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, in his bilateral in-person meeting with PM Modi, had asked Modi to intervene with Russian President Vladimir Putin to urgently put an end to Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Following Russia's declaration of war on Ukraine, Prime Minister Modi has spoken with the Russian President 3 times and has called for resolving the issues through dialogue and diplomacy. At the UN, India has abstained from voting during various votes on the ongoing crisis. Japan's Prime Minister Kishida had minced no words to condemn Russia's military operations against Ukraine when he had visited India, and had said that it had shaken the very foundations of the international order and must be dealt with firmly. The Quad members, Japan, the US and Australia, have also announced tough sanctions against Russia. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett on phone and had a detailed discussion on the recent geopolitical developments, including the situation in Ukraine. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke with his Israeli counterpart Naftali Bennett over the phone on April 4 and discussed the recent geopolitical developments, including the situation in Ukraine. Modi conveyed his best wishes to Bennett for early recovery after his COVID-19 diagnosis. The Prime Minister also expressed his condolences for the loss of lives in the recent terrorist attacks in Israel. The Prime Minister's office said the leaders had a detailed discussion on recent geopolitical developments, including the situation in Ukraine. They also reviewed the ongoing bilateral cooperation initiatives. Modi extended an invitation to Bennett to visit India as soon as possible. In the Russia-Ukraine war, India has called for restraint on all sides and said that all issues between both countries can only be resolved through diplomatic dialogue. Modi had also welcomed the ongoing negotiations between Russia and Ukraine and expressed hope that they would lead to a cessation of the conflict. Similarly, Bennett plays a peacemaker's role in the war and has made numerous calls on both Russian Putin and Ukrainian leader Zelensky to help resolve the conflict. India's southern state of Andhra Pradesh will have 13 new districts. The state government has completed a major administrative overhaul to decentralize governance in the state. Chief Minister Y.S. Jagan Mohan Reddy has created 13 new districts, taking the total to 26. This major administrative overhaul is aimed at the decentralization of governance and balanced development. Reddy said that these administrative reforms were part of the state policy from village secretariats to smaller districts to the capitals. Inaugurating the 13 newly carved out districts virtually, the CM said they would continue with the decentralization policy and the new districts will provide better administration and transparency, and the delivery mechanism of welfare would be smooth and effective. The new districts are Paravatipuram Manyam, Alluri Sitaramaraju, Anakapalli, Kakinada, Konasima, Iluru, NTR, Palanadu, Bapatla, Nandyala, Sri Satya Sai, Annamaya and Tirupati. Reddy stated that even smaller states like Arunachal Pradesh have 25 districts for better administration, and of all the 727 districts in the country, Andhra Pradesh is the only state with a high average of 38.15 lakh people in each district. With the creation of 13 more districts, the average population density has come down to 19.07 lakh, he said. Vinay Mohan Quatra, currently India's ambassador to Nepal, has been named as India's new foreign secretary. He will succeed Harshvardhan Shringla, who retires at the end of April 2022. Ambassador Shringla will be the coordinator for G20 summit to be hosted by India in November 2023. Indian ambassador to Nepal, Vinay Mohan Quatra, is named as the new Indian Foreign Secretary on April 4th to succeed Harshvardhan Shringla, who will retire on April 30th. Quatra is an Indian Foreign Service officer of the 1988 batch. He brings to the post a rich experience of more than 3 decades, having served India in different capacities in various countries. The Appointments Committee of the Cabinet has approved the appointment of Vinay Mohan Quatra, ambassador in Kathmandu, to the post of Foreign Secretary upon the superannuation of Harshvardhan Shringla on April 30th, 2022. The Department of Personnel and Training said. Quatra previously served as India's ambassador to France. Since he joined the IFS, he has worked in Geneva, United Nations, South Africa, Uzbekistan, Beijing and Washington. He has also worked in the Prime Minister's office. He speaks fluent Hindi, English and French. A new rail link between India's Jayanagar and Nepal's Khurda was inaugurated jointly by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Nepalese Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Deoba. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Nepalese counterpart Sher Bahadur Deoba inaugurated passenger rail services between Jayanagar in India and Khurda in Nepal. This will be the first broad gauge passenger rail service in Nepal. The Hindu pilgrimage center of Janakpur Dham, considered to be the birthplace of Lord Rama's wife Sita, will be one of the main attractions of the rail link between the two countries. Prime Minister Diobaji and I also agreed to give priority to trade and cross-border connectivity initiatives in all respects. The beginning of the Jayanagar-Kurtha rail line is a part of this, Modi said at a joint press meet with the Nepalese Prime Minister. Such schemes will make a great contribution to a smooth, hassle-free exchange of people between the two countries. He added, Railway Ministry officials said the rail link between the two neighbouring countries is part of an overall strategy for improved border management, planned and integrated development of border areas and infrastructure in a selective and phased manner. The Ministry of External Affairs is funding the network between Jayanagar in Bihar and Barbidas in Nepal at a cost of Rs 784 crore. The length of the Jayanagar-Bajalpura-Barbidas rail link is 68.72 kilometers, of which a 2.975 kilometer stretch is in India and a 65.745 kilometer stretch in Nepal. The route will pass through Bihar's Madhubani district, and on the Nepal side it will go through Dhanusha, Mahotari and Sirha districts. US-born Indian composer Ricky Cage has won his second Grammy Award for Best New Age Album Divine Tides at the recently held Grammys 2022 Awards. Cage shared the award with Stuart Copeland, the drummer of the iconic British rock band The Police, who collaborated with Cage in the album. At the 2022 Grammy Awards, Indian composer Ricky Cage won his second trophy for Best New Age Album Divine Tides. The US-born musician shared the award with Stuart Copeland, the drummer of the iconic British rock band The Police, who collaborated with Cage on the album. Cage later expressed gratitude on Instagram and wrote, "So grateful to have won the Grammy Award for our album Divine Tides. Absolutely love this living legend standing next to me, Stuart Copeland. Love all of you too. This is my second Grammy Award and Stuart's sixth." Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi joined several musicians and celebrities across the world to congratulate the Indian music composer for winning his second Grammy in the Best New Album category for Divine Tides. PM Modi tweeted in response to Cage's post thanking everyone for his win. At the 64th Grammy Awards ceremony held at the Las Vegas MGM Grand Marquis Ballroom, Cage greeted the audience with a namaste when he took the stage with Copeland to receive the prestigious gramophone. The teaser of the film Vikrant Rona has been released. The film is a 3D fantasy action adventure with South Indian star Kicha Sudeepa playing the titular role. The teaser of the film Vikrant Rona starring Kicha Sudeepa has been released. The 3D fantasy action adventure of epic proportions introduces Kicha Sudeepa as Vikrant Rona, aka the Lord of the Dark, who strikes fear into the hearts of his enemies. The teaser has been hailed for the filmmaker's marvelous use of VFX, BGM and action sequences to perfection. Other than Kicha Sudeepa as the lead protagonist, the film stars Jacqueline Fernandez, Niroop Bhandari and Neetha Ashok. The pan-world 3D film will release in 5 languages including Kannada, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam and Hindi, and is also expected to release in Arabic, German, Russian, Mandarin and English. Helmed by Anup Bhandari, Vikrant Rona is all set to be released on July 28, 2022. That's all for this bulletin of Daily India Report.
And thank you very much for that report, Himanshu. And of course, we know that 10 a.m. we have the daily, the weekly real estate update with Usha Chandra of Globe Nilri right here.
Akash Lodhia proudly presents the Ghazal Maestro Padma Shri Pankaj Udas live in concert at the prestigious Sydney Opera House. 4th September 2022 at 6:30 p.m.
से चिट्ठी आई है और आहिस्ता कीजिए बातें जिए तो जिए
Pankaj Udas celebrating 40 years of his musical journey in a one and only mega concert accompanied by his musicians from India.
चांदी जैसा रंग
Be there to witness the living legend Pankaj Udas live in concert to celebrate his musical milestone.
तुम्हें धनवान है गोरी
Tickets on sale now from www.sydneyoperahouse.com.
Well, of course, they saw which is of 90% sold. So, if you really want to be part of that, don't miss out. Act now. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's about all we have time for you in this segment. It's been wonderful having your company. And don't forget that we are back at 10 a.m. with the weekly real estate update with Usha Chandra of GlobeNet Realty. Until then, it's goodbye from us.